Hey, what's up, guys? It's the Fantasy Files podcast. It's your co-hosts, Brandon Deutsch and Grant Mona. This is our basketball Week 6 edition. We got special guest Sean Kretz with us today. Very knowledgeable basketball guy, big Toronto Raptors fan, knows everything about Toronto Raptors that's ever happened. And yeah, he's just great. Before we start today, I wanted to let you guys know we're doing the timer thing again. We've decided to implement a 10-minute timer, and we'll just go through the picks through that, and I'll ask Brandon and Sean about the picks, and we'll go really quick who's going to be the winners and losers this week. Before I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, The Bookie, your sharp sports betting friend that sends you an email each day full of free picks, tips, tools, and insider resources you need to know. If you want to visit it, and please subscribe. It's thebookie.co, www.thebookie.co, and it's just thebookie.co, and it's one of the best betting picks ever. It's great. It's number one newsletter for betting. It's got its own website. It's really legit. It's very consistent, and we love our thebookie.co. So please check it out. Please subscribe, and you can win money. So with that, let's get into the picks. So I'm going to put this timer on right here, and we got some guys we're going to talk about, and here we go. 10 minutes starting now. Okay, well, I want to talk about first is Josh Hart, and this is why. Josh Hart is on the Pelicans, obviously. He's been having a beast here, averaging 16.6 fantasy points. Reason why we're talking about him is because in ESPN leagues, specifically, he's only, you would think, 16.6 fantasy points per game on the whole season is great. You would think a lot of people, he's only owned in 5% of leagues. Of leagues and just all fantasy platforms, which is crazy to me. It's mind-boggling because if you have a guy that's been that consistent, 3-and-D, getting steals, putting up points like that, putting up fantasy points, 16.6 on the whole year, he's a sure thing to average over 13 fantasy points per week, what we describe as a winner. So, I mean, he's a winner for me. This is a guy you need to pick up, guys. He's brilliant. If he's there and you're playing with some fools and he's still on the waiver wire, you need to take advantage of fools who pick this guy up because he's legit and he's very consistent, been consistent all year. What do you think, Grant and Sean? Grant first, and we'll go Sean.
Yeah, it's crazy because the stats don't pop out at you. Like, he went 3 for 13 against the Wizards in one game, but he still managed a double-double, like 13 and 12. He's such a good rebounder that some of those stats don't even matter, like his point standards. So yeah, he's a winner for me. It's just, I mean, his points are not consistent, but if you look at steals, rebounds, even assists, he's gotten up to 11 assists in one game. I kind of like it. So yeah, I like, you know what, that's a good thing that you brought up Josh Hart. I kind of like that. I forgot about this guy because he's buried on the Pelicans.
The Pelicans are so bad. No one even knows like he's available in fantasy. Like no one watches them. Sean, what do you think about him?
I have to agree a lot with Grant. I think he's going to be a winner. Like he's a shooting guard, small forward, but he rebounds really well for his size. And if you look at his last 6 games, he's had at least one steal in every game. So he's going to fill up the stat sheet. And then when he scores, that's just bonus on top. And that's what gives him those big games. So I think he's a winner, regardless if he scores or not.
Yeah, and I thought it was 30%, actually only 18% he's owned. So that's crazy. Basically 80% available. So that's a lot. That's even more than I thought. So there are really some guys you can take advantage of in your league and pick him up because he's consistent, like Sean mentioned. Even this is an off game for him. 12 fantasy points, 6 points, but he had 2 steals. He's always getting the steals. He's beast on the defensive end. Next guy I want to go into is Patrick Beverly. This is hilarious because he's known for his, trash talking and him being this guy that's like, it's Cancun on you, blah, blah, all the Twitter stuff. But this is a guy that's averaging 15.2 fantasy points on the year. This is a guy that's averaging also 27 minutes per game, and he's only owned in 11% of leagues. This is a sure thing winner to average over 13 fantasy. Every week, he's getting the minutes. He's a veteran on a team that's very young and needs veterans. And he's just a beast defensively, similar to Josh Hart. He's going to get steals. He'll be a dog. He's going to put percentage. And we saw that with the Clippers when he was on them too. That he's getting the minutes on the Wolves, and he's a sure thing winner for me. What do you think? I'll go Sean or Grant first, then Sean again. We'll go in the same order.
Yeah. He has a bad reputation from a lot of people, but if you have him on your team, you love him. If you don't, you hate him. But in terms of fantasy, we don't care about that. Look, on the 20th of November against Memphis, he went 11-5-4. That's really good, and he had 2 steals and a block. Like, people don't look at these things, because they think he's such a pest. He's dirty. He's a dirty player. But if you look at the stats, if you look at his numbers, really good across the board. He won't wow you with like 15 to 20 points, but he's going to get the dirty work done, and that's what you need in fantasy. You need one of those guys. So, yeah, I'm all in on it. I loved him. I'm a Clippers fan. Of course I love him.
Yeah, honestly, for me, it's not a guy I would get, but looking at his past 4 games, he has 8 blocks, which is incredible for a point guard. Like, you don't see that, but that also might be why his fantasy value is high right now, which is why I would leave him away. For me, when I'm looking at a point guard, I want someone that's going to hit 3, someone that's going to score, because point guards are going to put up assists regardless, steals. So for me, I'd stay away for a guy like Patrick Beverly. But if you need that defensive kick or for the stat leagues, he's definitely a cop right now because he's filling it up for sure.
Definitely. I mean, he's been so consistent, right? We talked about Pat Connaughton last week. He's very similar to that, like a guy you wouldn't think would be a fantasy god, but has been a fantasy god this year. Let's go to Khem Birch next. And this is a guy who averages over 23 minutes per game on a very deep Raptors team, very good Raptors team that's going to make the playoffs probably this year. And look, I mean, the stats.
Probably. Yes, they are.
Definitely. You're right. They'd make it over the Celtics. I've said that. Sean convinced me early on in the year. Yeah, I mean, the stats don't jump off the board with the 7 points per game, six rebounds a game, 1 steal, and half a block a game. And he's just consistent. He's going to make every shot. Field goal percentage matters in fantasy basketball. Look at his 3 games: 18 fantasy points, then 25 fantasy points, and then 14 fantasy points. I mean, this is a guy that's been very consistent. He's filling the Chris Boucher really well. And he's definitely outpacing Precious Achiuwa for minutes, so and production.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a guy that was very good in Orlando last year, a sleeper in fantasy basketball, and he's great this year. So it was the same order, Grant and Sean. What do you think?
I'm going to let Sean go first. I know he's been eager. He's been itching at the bit to talk about Khem Birch. He deserves to go first about this guy.
So the first thing you have to remember about Khem Birch is last year it was a contract year, so he's trying to fill up the stats as much as he can to get that bag, right? But now he's just worried about winning. He's a winner. He's Canadian, playing on a Canadian team. He wants to win a ring. So thing I realized is he's really gaining a good relationship with Van Fleet and other guards, and their pick and roll is the best out of any of the other centers. And the centers on the Raptors with Precious and Boucher has been a little inconsistent, and Khem Birch is that one guy that comes in and has that punch and super consistent. And on that pick and roll, he's automatic with that little dump off. So especially with OG out this week, or it's no timetable, we don't know how long he's going to be out. He's going to get those extended minutes, and they're going to rely on him a little more. I think he is definitely a winner in fantasy this week, with him already averaging around 13 points for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be right up there with you because, I mean, just looking at his game log the past couple weeks, look, he had 10 and 9, and then he had 4 steals and 2 blocks. That's like a beast of a stat line.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of like that guy to where like nobody's paying attention to him because he's on the Raptors. And the Raptors kind of made a little buzz early, and they kind of cooled down a little bit. And now people are just like, oh well, let's not pay attention to him. You got to pay attention to this team. Trust me, really fun to watch. Khem Birch is right up there with some of the guys that you want to watch. I mean, look, 14, 10, 7. The points aren't going to go out at you. But look, 2 steals, 4 steals, 1 steal, 2 blocks in back-to-back games. Really good stat lines for fantasy, guys. He's a winner.
Yeah, he's a winner. I forgot to mention that he was a winner. I just thought evident by the way I was describing his statistics. All right, we got like three minutes left. Time flies, right? So let's go into Kevin Huerter, who benefiting off of DeAndre Hunter's absence. He's been just an absolute putting up over 15 fantasy past 4 games. And it seems like this is a trend. This is a guy who's very tough. He's going to hit threes. His defense has gotten better, gets some assists, gets some steals. I'm in on him this week. I think he's a sure thing to average over 13 fantasy points, which is the threshold to be considered a winner. He's available in a lot of leagues. He's on there in most leagues. So, I mean, this is an absolute winner for me this week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, he's not shooting the three very well in his last 10, but if you look at his field goal percentage, 52%, he's scoring pretty well in double digits the past 3 games. I think he's just trending upward. He's kind of one of those guys that kind of rose to the occasion in the playoffs and then kind of had a slump to begin the year, but I think he's starting to find his ground. He's had like I said, 3 straight games with double-digit points. He's not going to get you anything on the defensive end, but that's fine because he makes it up with his offensive game. So, yeah, I like him, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree. Looking at his stat line here, like he's averaging 24 minutes, and I think minutes is a big indicator for fantasy value because obviously the more minutes you play, the more impact you can make. But in the last 6 games, he's had over 30 minutes 4 times. So I think just pure on that alone, I think he's a winner because he's scoring more, he's getting more minutes. Winner.
Absolutely. We only got like a minute left, minute 30 left. I want to bring up Patty Mills. This is a guy that's available in over 80% of leagues. This is a consistent guy, point guard for the Brooklyn Nets, right? Last game log recently, 17.25 fantasy points, 26 fantasy points, 5 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points, and then 16 fantasy points again. This is an Uberton recently, and he's just stepped up his game a lot. And he's taken the load off of Harden and Durant. A sure thing winner. I think he's going to average over 13 fantasy points for sure. It's even a question this week.
Yeah, just going. I mean, shoot, his game log looks really good. The one outlier was against Golden State. And, you know, you take that out of there, 29, 21, 22, and 14. Dude's been a spark for them. And obviously, look, they're an offensive-oriented team. They're going to get guys that have that. But the thing that stood out to me, he's not in 80% of the leagues. Like, that's crazy. That is crazy to me that he's not even in lineups. But, yeah, I mean, he'll get you maybe 1 to 2 steals a game. He's actually stepped that up a bit in the past week. So, yeah, I like Patty Mills. I mean, I actually put money on him a couple weeks ago. Didn't cash because obviously it was against Golden State. It was 13 plus.
Timer just went off.
Of course, right? Of
Timer
course, the one time.
Sean, what do you? I'm sorry,
course,
Sean. What do you think about?
After that, he went off.
Patty Mills. I'm sorry to cut you off, Grant. Real quick.
Patty Mills.
No.
For now, he's averaging over 30 plus minutes the last 5 games, and I think that has a lot to do with Joe Harris being out. So for this week, I say he's a winner. Long term, he's not. There's too many guys that can score bunches, and that's going to limit him a lot. So while Joe Harris is out, so for this week, he's a winner. Long term.
Okay, so I'm just going to disregard the timer a little bit. We'll go people just because we have a guest, so I feel like it's a little different. Don't want to cut the time. Let's go next into we'll go 2 more guys. Will Barton. And this is a guy that many own. He's owned in 77% of ESPN fantasy leagues, but I feel like his impact on the Nuggets has been undermined this year by most media outlets. I mean, he's at 19 fantasy points per game. If we're just talking fantasy, if we're talking real life, he's scoring a lot of points, averaging over 16 a game, getting the assist numbers, getting the steal numbers, playing good defense. And he has these scoring bursts. Like he's become like a Lou Williams type player. He's always kind of a Lou Williams type player, but like, you know what I mean? With Michael Porter Jr. out, he's had to really step up his game. He's played fantastic. If you don't own this guy and you're not starting him, you should. You have to own him. I mean, you got to start him, lock him in. Sure thing. I mean, he's 9 fantasy points a year, 13 fantasy points. We won't even be talking about this guy again. I just thought we needed to bring him up just because of his impact to fantasy basketball, just like Josh Hart, winner. It's going to average over 13 fantasy points for you.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's basically, I mean, he's one of their key pieces now. I mean, with Murray out, Jokic has been out too. He's going to be coming back soon, but this guy's kind of one of their mainstays. Like you said, we're probably not going to be talking about this guy after this week, but if you don't have this guy in your lineup, you probably should. I mean, going back to last week, he put up with back-to-back games with 25 and 30. Like that's like elite. That's not even like good. That's like top shooting guard elite. Then he went 23, 19. Like the guy puts up points. So he doesn't shoot well from 3, which is fine. But you know, he's going to put up volume, and obviously something's going to go in. He's not a bad shooter. So yeah, I really like Will Barton.
Mm-hmm. Will Barton's a guy that I've had on my fantasy team the last like 3 years, and he's all reliable because he fills up the stat sheet every game, and he's going to score. And then on the nights he scores efficiently, his fantasy points are through the roof. So this guy is a winner for the rest of the year, I think, for the rest of his career, really.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Winner.
The guy I want to talk next and last is Luke Wensdorf. And this is why it's a guy who's had a lot of outbursts fantasy-wise recently with, 21 fantasy points per game on the 14th, 15th, 17th, the 17th, 36 fantasy points. Then he's kind of went back to earth. He has went back to earth. 8 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points, 8 fantasy points, right? So efficiency is key with this guy. He's obviously never been an elite shooter. Has been his biggest problem, but he's an elite defender. Doesn't get you enough steals to be reliable, though. So, I mean, his fantasy value truly comes from his rebounding and his scoring. And is there really a 2 guy to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? No, but I guess it's probably Dort. I mean, the team is not that good, so we don't know. I guess it was Moses Britt last year, who's not even playing this year for the Mavericks. But, I mean, Dort to me, I think his burst is done. I couldn't count on anybody on the Thunder not named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a loser for me this.
I mean, it's tough to say because you look at those six game stretch where he had over 20 every game. And you're like, okay, well, maybe the Thunder have found another superstar because this guy's elite on the defensive end. We all knew that. And then his offensive game has just improved last year. It's improved this year. So you kind of see that and you're like, okay, well, maybe this is where he comes around. And obviously he went back to earth because he played better teams. He played Milwaukee, he played Boston, he played Atlanta. So he's going to have games where you go up against better defenses. You're going to have, games like this. He's not an elite offensive player. We all know that. He's just improving each year. So to put him in your lineup and be like a solidified guy, I wouldn't say just yet. And I know people are going to get on us for saying that, but he had a good 6-game stretch. He went back to earth. I mean, it's
one of those guys.
What it is.
He's one of those guys who's he's a NBA player and he'll be that for 10 plus years. You know what I mean? He's never going to be elite. But Bookie.co, our sponsor, we appreciate them so much. Your hosts, Mona, Brandon Deutsch, and thank you for listening to Fantasy 5 Pod. Now, quicker, get your picks quick. There we go.